Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Industry News Podcast. My name is James Dixon. As always, I wish you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you join today's podcast from. And on today's podcast, do you know what? I'm going to keep the introduction short today in terms of what we're going to be talking about, because our guest today is absolutely best positioned to discuss and talk about this really interesting topic that we've got on the podcast today. I'm delighted to say that the founder of Spectrum, the first UK speaker and entertainment agency dedicated to booking and developing diverse speakers, Lauralee Whyte, joins us today on the podcast. Lauralee, welcome to the Event Industry News Podcast, and thanks for taking a bit of time out of your schedule at the moment to have a chat about what it is that you're launching.
Hi, James. Thanks very much for having me.
As I said, very, very briefly, the UK's first speaker and entertainment agency dedicated to booking and developing diverse speakers. And I really would like you to now pick up and tell our listeners, so that you give the best explanation possible, exactly what you mean by that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have worked as a speaker agent for the last 6 years, and I've worked in the event industry for 15 years, kind of starting out in experiential marketing. And yeah, kind of naturally gravitated towards working with speakers. I really enjoyed, kind of promoting people and just listening to the different types of expertise that there is out there. I didn't even really know it was a thing until I kind of entered the event industry. And yeah, as time went on, I became very aware that the speakers that I was booking tended to look the same, and if I was looking for speakers who would look different or come from different backgrounds, then invariably they would solely be talking about diversity in the workplace,
Sure.
or their experience as somebody who is a woman or LGBTQ person of color, whatever their kind of protected characteristics are.
Sure. Yeah.
And for me, and I think for a lot of people, the pandemic brought about lots of introspection and focus on, on what's out there and what we're doing. And I realized that actually I wanted to work with different talent, and I didn't know where they were. A lot of the kind of competitor speaker bureaus work with the same talent. So it just led me to question, where are the talent who will talk about health or well-being or engineering or technology, but they might be somebody who is differently abled, or somebody who is Latino, or as I said, like, so just different. And that the kind of the nugget for Spectrum came about from then. And it just almost became an obsession, really. And I've connected with all of those people from various industries. I've kind of taken the last few months to really source that talent, and to find the best of the best who are hiding. But now they're out, and hopefully just to provide the event industry with another way.
Another way of sourcing it, and something that struck me when I was considering the topic and considering what you're doing with the agency, is this idea of who is inspirational. What is inspiration? Where does it come from? It can come from anywhere. It can be anybody. And yet, certainly, if we look in the corporate world and what we traditionally think of instantly as a speaker, as somebody who's coming to an awards dinner or a dinner or a conference, they're going to walk in their business suit, aren't they, with a shirt and tie on, or a female in a sharp dressed suit, and come up and deliver some sort of PowerPoint presentation. Talk about their life in business. I'm being a little bit cliched deliberately to sort of highlight this point that you're making, that really inspiration can come from anywhere, and it strikes me that what you've set up is an opportunity for people who may not even know that they could be an inspiration to others to come forward and have the opportunity to go and speak to people.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about representation, and the opportunity for people to see what's possible and not feel like they are confined by their background, by their cultural status, by the color of their skin, by anything really. And I think as an industry and as the world, we're becoming aware that everyone needs the opportunity and the stage to be able to be themselves. And hopefully I can help to provide that platform for those people.
And of course, the interesting that you said when you were describing the agency is it's about finding um, diverse speakers who are not necessarily talking about diversity, because of course, as we've become better at embracing diversity and creating a diverse culture, people from different backgrounds now and all walks of life have jobs and roles and places in society in across the entire spectrum. So we've got the opportunity to draw on people's experience and not just again, it's pigeonholing people sometimes, isn't it? When we want to talk about diversity, we will instantly think we'll get somebody in from a diverse background to talk about diversity, which in itself is being a little bit narrow-minded.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is it. And those experts, and they've always been there. They've always existed, but as I said, perhaps haven't put themselves at the forefront, because they just didn't feel that it was a level playing field. They didn't feel that there was a seat at the table for them. And one of the interesting things I found as a speaker agent, when I would be approached by a specific industry to say, we're trying to encourage more diversity and inclusivity, within our field, and I would look for the speakers who cover that. And yeah, as I said, they all looked the same. So I had to diversify my approach to sourcing those speakers. So where do they exist? They exist in communities of people that they feel look and sound the same way as them, because that's where they can thrive. So we've always, we've had women in events for a long time,
Yes.
but now we have differently abled people in technology, or black people in engineering. They've created micro communities, and that's where I've tapped into those to kind of to get the best talent.
And of course, again, when we go back to some of the historical cliches in the events industry when it comes to sourcing speakers, we, I suppose, naturally and historically have gravitated towards people who we consider from an age point of view to have experience, to be in a position where they can then speak in front of an audience of people and offer some snippets of wisdom to them. And of course, it doesn't have to be somebody of a particular age who has wisdom or inspiration to offer to a group of people that they may be speaking to. And that's why I was interested to see of the partnership with Brixton Finishing School and looking at groups, 18 to 25-year-olds and what they could potentially do. Tell us a little bit about that, and particularly what your thoughts are on the subject of people not necessarily needing to be of any particular age in order to stand up and offer some inspiration to people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was setting up Spectrum, I, of course, became really interested in organizations that were, trying to bring about social change, and came across the Brixton Finishing School and really loved their ethic, their ethos, and their values. And, have kind of got involved with Ali Owen, who is the founder. And what I love about them is their approach to sourcing and retaining talent. And as I said, these are younger people who may not necessarily have had access or traditional routes of education, so they haven't necessarily gone to university. And it's that they've kind of approached the gatekeepers of media and advertising to say, look, there is amazing creative talent out there who haven't come from, university, but in order for you to diversify and innovate as a creative entity, you need to look outside the traditional ways of sourcing talent. So it's been absolutely incredible to work with them. And the younger generation have just grown up with a completely different reality. They're already armed with the way to kind of monetize their own personal brand through social media, and they're incredibly savvy and incredibly switched on. So one of the exercises we did with the Brixton Finishing School students is they actually created the brand design for the Spectrum logo.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's to kind of reinvesting in that talent and bringing them up with what we do. But just kind of going back to, young people having things to say, like we all have different experiences and we've always got things to learn from one another. Like, I was young once. I thought I was down with the kids, but it was a really long time ago. So it's working with them has been absolutely eye-opening.
If you want to see that logo that Lauralee referenced there, at the end of the podcast, we will be putting up a link to the spectrumspeakers.co.uk website. So you'll be able to see that directly for anybody who's listening to today's podcast. Hop over and check out that link, and you can see this logo. One thing on the subject of younger people and talking about being young once, but the current generation, something that has become really pertinent, particularly in the last 12 months, in terms of the events industry, in terms of how events are delivered, is speaking down a video link, exactly as we're doing today, using a tech platform to communicate. I've seen it hundreds of times, and I'm sure you have as well in your role in booking speakers for 15 years, is there are a certain generation of people that if you put them in front of a camera, be it a smartphone or a full-on, television camera, they go to pieces. They're not quite sure. There's something about the camera being put in their face that makes them fall over their words. They become inarticulate. And that's where training and stuff comes into it. But with the younger generation and the 18 to 25-year-olds that you're working with at the Brixton Finishing School, because of things like TikTok and smartphones and people having video chats now as the norm, I think that generation are very good in front of camera. Mostly, you put them in front of camera, no problem at all. I'll speak, I'll smile, I'll talk to somebody. And that, to me, puts that particular generation in a great position and potentially has great opportunity for you as an agency, particularly with how events are now being delivered.
Definitely. Yeah. As I said, they are just so switched on, social media and all of the different conferencing platforms has just kind of opened up a whole new way of being. I found it really interesting at the beginning of the pandemic when we all had to, I'm going to use the P word, pivot.
Pirouette. We've used pirouette as well.
Pirouette. Okay. I haven't used that one actually. But pivot to virtual. And it was incredible to see so many really seasoned and experienced speakers, as you said, just fall to pieces. I think the first virtual speaker that we worked with, he kind of came on, he had all of this clutter in the background. He was like just leaning at his desk. And it was just like he just had no awareness of the fact that there was an audience. It was almost like there wasn't a camera there. He was on a phone call. It's probably like multitasking as well, like ordering his online shopping while he was speaking. We other than those speakers who have kind of had broadcast experience, that they were the ones who were able to make the change and adapt really easily. But for others, it was a baptism of fire, and they really had to learn quickly. But thankfully, I think most of us have got there.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you know, we should mention things like YouTube as well. I mentioned a few sort of different platforms and, you know, the methods in which the younger generation are used to communicating with. But of course, the YouTube generation that we are now in as well means that a lot of those young people will have had experience of doing their own broadcast of in some way, shape, or form, whether it be with a smartphone or a slightly more sophisticated setup. I mean, how many kids have got the O-ring of LED lights now in their bedrooms, so that when they do their TikTok videos, you know that they're really well lit. They've just got a naturally a more natural instinct towards that whole broadcast culture. I know I've said it and I'm repeating myself, but I genuinely think that offers really sort of exciting prospects for the events industry in the next 10 years or so, as these younger people come into the industry or come into any form of business and find themselves being asked to speak at events. So I guess you found yourself at what could be a very key point in business and in industry post pandemic of bringing this agency to life.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, as a whole industry and as the world, we are really at a major crunch point. The old ways of doing things have served us well up until now, but now that we've opened up to this whole new kind of digital experience and this hybrid life, we really need those skills and those resources of people that are naturally working in that way and have been for a long time. Us us
Yeah.
dinosaurs, where we're actually having to learn from them. They are educating us in ways that we just didn't know about. And yeah, now it's up to us to innovate and move forward, and to bring old and new practices together and create something that's just new and fresh.
Going back to if I can refer to it as the core value or the core message of Spectrum as an agency, and that is to offer a diverse selection of speakers, not necessarily talking about the subject of diversity. Businesses are driven by supply and demand in most cases. So when you launched this, was it an idea that you thought, no, there is a market for this, I just instinctively know it? Or did you speak to clients and people who are looking to book speakers who are actually saying, we're really struggling to find this? What was the balance like between your own instinct as what would work as a business and the actual demand from potential clients for this particular offering?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because as a speaker agent, working for other companies beforehand, I had lots of clients who would say to me, we're intentionally trying to be more inclusive and more diverse. Please can you find these people? And yeah, sometimes I could, and sometimes I couldn't, just because, as I said, I was fishing in the same pool.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, and then subsequently, I kind of thought, it felt like the right thing to do, for me. Just to create another space, as I said, for people who are from different backgrounds. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
No. I was going to ask you something then, because in terms of sourcing them,
Yeah.
it strikes me that what you have to do is you have to find talent. You're like a record company exec going out to find the next new band. You've got to go to gigs. You've got to go to pubs and see bands who are just starting out, who might be a bit rough around the edges, but you spot that little spark of something in there. And you mentioned there about sort of all fishing in the same pool for the same pool of speakers. In terms of sort of breaking the mold from that to launch Spectrum, have you thought, and with a blank piece of paper, right, where could I go? Who could I speak to? How am I going to find those people who may be a little bit rough around the edges, but actually I think there's a spark there, they could offer something? Have you found yourself doing things differently to how you've done them in your career thus far in sourcing speakers?
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to what you were saying about supply and demand, I've amassed a fantastic network of speakers with different levels of expertise. So that is working with different talent agencies, ones that are global, because obviously we have a global reach now, working with virtual platforms.
Yeah.
So that's opened out a more diverse market of people that can speak about different things. And it's one of the other things is that we work bespoke to brief. So if a client says, I want somebody who can talk about AI, and I want them to be able to communicate with mothers, for example, then I will tap into those communities. Clubhouse is a great resource for finding new speakers. That's another thing that's come out from the pandemic. So there are now so many different ways of sourcing talent. So it's been fantastic for me as a process setting up Spectrum, because it means that I get to work with so many different people across different ideals.
How often do you come across people who have never spoken before, who for them it will be their first time?
There are lots of people. I think it really does depend on the client and what they're looking for. More often than not, they really are looking for somebody who knows their stuff, who's tested, who's proven. So it's difficult to kind of get your break, as it were, as a speaker. And I tend to gravitate towards people who do have that proven experience, just because obviously they've got to be able to hold their own at a live event, amongst their own peers, amongst people who are quite knowledgeable in that area of expertise anyway. So they need to be able to impart knowledge in a way that the guests are taking away something new. So with the kind of grassroots element to Spectrum, we make it very clear that that's what the client is working with, and that's what they're looking for. So that tends to be more of a kind of smaller internal, client employee training or something like that, as opposed to a kind of open live forum.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the chicken and egg situation, the classic that you get in all types of business. A company wants someone with the experience, but how do you get the experience without being given a break somewhere? And of course there are opportunities, and I guess that takes you back to some of the training and stuff that you're doing with the young people that you're working with, is that there are opportunities out there. It doesn't have to be a gigantic pharmaceutical conference for 6,000 people in a gigantic hall. It could be to 10 or 20 people at an internal company meeting, a training afternoon somewhere. There are opportunities out there, aren't there? And again, I was wondering if as an agency you're going to be looking purely for those big opportunities. And I know obviously that comes with revenue that you need as a business, but whether or not you will be looking at smaller events and smaller scale things where there may be opportunities for slightly less experienced speakers to go in and maybe hone their craft a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's we want to be able to offer a platform for speakers at different levels, and equally, for the end client, for the corporates, for the organizations, they get to experience and be part of nurturing talent and be part of that future generation. And as you said, like understanding that everyone has to start somewhere and everyone comes from somewhere. One of the things I often say to people who are asking how to start out, is to do things like this, is to kind of record yourself having conversations, with your peers about your area of expertise, because, it starts out online, it starts out as one-to-one, and, you can really hone your craft in that way. And then, as you said, just kind of move on to offering yourself to smaller organizations to say, look, I'm going to talk about this. I'm fresh, I'm new. So bear with me. But yeah, as I said, I think we are all so much more accepting and understanding and just kind of wanting everyone to succeed at every level.
Sure, and I guess again, I'm assuming things here, so correct if I'm wrong. But as a company set up to offer a diverse selection of speakers, I guess one of the really important messages that you will give to your speaking clients is be yourself. You know, the whole point of you being booked or being of interest to our client or to you as an agency is because they might offer something different, because they are from a background maybe that doesn't stereotype them as they would have been, or as that particular client may have always gone with in the past. And what I guess would be important for your speakers is to remain themselves, to not become the cliche, to be who they are, because that's why they were of interest in the first place.
100%. I was speaking to one of my speakers last week, and she is in kind of artistic technologies. It's all a very interesting and niche experience that you'll find out about in due course. But yeah, she sort of said, oh, typically what are clients looking for? What are the kind of talks that they that they need? And I said, no, we're scrapping that. Like I want to give them you and what you have to say, because that's what makes you interesting. If you're just saying the same thing that somebody else has said, then they can just get somebody else to say that. And equally, that kind of goes back to how I had to approach starting Spectrum. I thought, oh, am I going to alienate some of the companies that that are not necessarily not wanting to be inclusive, but aren't that just want people and they want them quickly. But it's like, actually, no, I have to define my client base, and my client base work with me because of the service that I provide, and not me trying to provide a service that fits everybody.
And fingers crossed with the launch of the agency, what you will hopefully do as well is maybe give some of those corporate bookers, whether that's a personal assistant to the CEO or whoever it is that's responsible for maybe sourcing the speakers for a corporate event or a large scale, conference, maybe it just pokes them with a stick, a metaphorical stick, to maybe think, let's do this a little bit differently going forward. There are opportunities out there. I don't have to phone up in a panic 1 week before and get the same guy that spoke at the conference 3 years ago because he was okay. People just need to maybe think a little bit longer term and just take a little bit of a step back, which, going back to what we said about the pandemic and this being a great period of opportunity for people, we had that luxury for a period of time, didn't we, of being able to maybe just take a step back, to just breathe for a bit and look at things a bit differently. So I would certainly, as we approach the end of today's episode, say that this is a big opportunity for people with opportunities that are presented with companies like Spectrum. It is for people to think a little bit differently, do things differently to how you did them before, because there are opportunities for you and the clients that Lauralee represents out there. It's been great to speak to you today, Lauralee. I've sort of gone off on a little bit of a like a Zen moment there. Offering people spiritual advice. We should point out a couple of key bits of information before we wrap up today, and that is, of course, how people can get in touch and find out a little bit more about the work that you guys are doing. Websites, social media handles, anything you've got, throw it at us now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on LinkedIn at Spectrum Speakers and Entertainers. You can also find my personal LinkedIn, which is Lauralee Whyte. Our website is currently under construction, but you can find all of our contact information on our landing page. So that is www.spectrumspeakers.co.uk/coming soon, which is really important. And we are also on Instagram. With that, our Instagram handle is at Spectrum Speakers UK. And if you would like to email me, you can do so on inquiries@spectrumspeakers.co.uk.
Fabulous. That's great. Loads of information out there, guys, and I urge you to go and have a look at it. We mentioned earlier about the great logo that's been designed by some of the young people that Lauralee and the team at Spectrum Speakers have been working with. So go to their landing page, spectrumspeakers.co.uk/coming soon, and check that out and find out about the guys and see what they're doing. It's been great to have you on the show today, and a really refreshing topic to talk about. Certainly not something that we've spoken about in any particular detail on the podcast in any one of the previous 250 odd episodes, Lauralee. So it's been fascinating, and do keep in touch. Tell us how things are going. We'd love to maybe pick up this subject again a little bit further down the line, find out how the agency is developing, and find out about some of the stuff that no doubt you will learn in the coming months, if of course you would like to come back on and have a chat with us.
Oh, absolutely. No, I can't wait. Thank you for having me, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Not a problem at all. We are out of time today on today's episode of the Event Industry News podcast. But before we wrap up, as always, a quick reminder to make sure that if you are listening to today's podcast on your podcast platform, head over to eventindustrynews.com on whatever device you choose to, and check out some of the latest news, features, supplements, and information that's being put out via the eventindustrynews.com website, where, of course, you can see video versions of all of our podcasts as well. And the reverse to that is always that if you are already watching this video on eventindustrynews.com today, don't forget that you can check out audio-only versions of all of our podcasts via your chosen podcast platform. We're out there on all of them. And a little shout out as well today. This will go out in the next few weeks. We're recording this sort of mid-September time, but registration for Event Tech Live is now open. That's at the Old Truman Brewery on the 3rd and 4th of November this year, back in live in person at the Old Truman Brewery. Registration is now open, so head over to eventtechlive.com and get yourself registered, and we hope to see you down at the Old Truman Brewery in London at the start of November. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks very much to everybody for joining us today. Thanks again to Lauralee Whyte from Spectrum Speakers for joining us as today's fabulous guest, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.